have to give a few minutes to people to start streaming in. The way this package works is that there's many people that are waiting in an antechamber, and that we welcome to everybody to the European Roundtable Climate Change on Climate Change Sustainable Transition discussion with Director General Karsten Sach this afternoon. I would like to take 3 minutes until we get enough people here. We were already what, 100, over 100. But what I would also like to point out is that we have a firm deadline of 1 hour. This is not going to go over 1 hour. So as such, time is precious, and we cannot really waste too much time. It's an opportunity that Dr. Sach has taken the time to join us. So Karsten, if you will allow me, for it's 15:01, very precise. We'll wait another 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, I see already people raising their hands in terms of the asking question. The way this is going to work out is that we will have we will basically go through an initial set of comments for Karsten Sach. Then I will take the opportunity to ask a few questions. That's the privilege of the chair, to ask a few questions. And then we will go and have people ask questions from the floor. There is an electronic arm raising instrument that I see on my screen. I think by now, everybody, after 3 months or 4 months, everybody's become very familiar with all this, whether it's the Microsoft or the Skype or Zoom. Everybody knows these things very well. So I think that we can conclude that everybody knows how to do this. So what I would like to do is start, Karsten, because again, people will stream in, and we are about 155 right now. But welcome Karsten Sach, who is the Director General for European and International Climate Policy in the German Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety. Karsten, the only thing that I would say that your name is longer than my European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transition. But welcome with us this afternoon. I think it's a privilege for us to have you, and I'm very happy. I know that your time is sandwiched between important meetings in Berlin, as you are about to assume the presidency of the European Union. On July 1st, Germany will assume the presidency from Croatia, will be followed by Portugal, and the Troika will function. And you are already getting into a situation where many are looking at this as a presidency crisis. And on the climate change policy, there are a number of very important issues, obviously, on the agenda. I will cite only a few: the climate law, the 2030 targets, the EU NDC update. These are not important things. These are historical things. These are not important. These are historic. This is a historical moment. So Germany is assuming, together with their colleagues in the EU, a role which will be with us for decades, and will change in many ways the way we live our life. So the way I'd like to do it, I'd like to invite Karsten to give us some of his views that he discussed with colleagues. I think that there's been a council that some of these have been discussed, but on the priorities of the German presidency, then I'll ask a few questions, and then we'll go to Q&A. Karsten, please.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you for inviting me. It's my 4th EU presidency and will be my last one. But all the meetings, more or less, I have now is about midnight and national climate politics, and that will change from July 1 onwards. Yes, of course, the corona pandemic has altered our timing quite a lot, and it had considerable impact on our planning. But nevertheless, the 2 formal council meetings in October and in December are confirmed. We will have an informal environment ministers meeting on the 30th of September, 1st of October. And but we start up with some video conferences to get a political dialogue and the main priorities up and running from day one. climate action and the implementation of the European Green Deal, which is the growth strategy, the new growth strategy of the EU, remain the key priorities. But also, I think it is important that we ensure cohesion within the EU. The EU as a union which safeguards peace and social cohesion is questioned, and I think if we get it right, we can get stronger out of the crisis. You mentioned already, we are strong believers in trio presidencies with our two partners, Portugal and Slovenia. We have set up a three presidency program, and we follow through initiatives. Having said that, the finance package, which heads of state and government try to settle at least the principles on the 17th and 18th of July, where we ought to have a European summit with the two facets of the multi-annual financial framework and the EU recovery instruments will play an important role. And therefore, I think the point I want to make, it is important that we get the mandate by heads of state and government not to act only on short-term issues, but linking climate change in the text of the EU heads of state and government already in, because important decisions will be taken, and the climate agenda is strongly linked up with some financial asks as well. On climate, you mentioned there will be two big dossiers. The first is the EU climate law. It is our aspiration to come to a general agreement, the general approach in our October Council, which is planned for the 23rd of October. Parliament should be ready in about the same time. Probably the even bigger issue, and they are intertwined, is a decision on the EU proposal to raise the ambition level of the EU from 40% against 1990 baselines to 50 to 55%. Our Chancellor, we have said that we support that, but our important function is to get people together to rally behind this target. We just had a council, virtual and formal meeting of the Croatian presidency, and you could hear that a large majority of climate ministers were positive into that direction, but we also heard a few countries clearly spelled out some skepticism or made pretty clear conditions, be it finance, be it other points. So distributional issues came, and issues of what instruments you use came into mind. It is important that we get an excellent basis from the Commission, and we are all aware that by the end of September we are awaiting a so-called impact assessment, where the Commission puts forward its assessment of how these targets could be met through which instruments and what impact it has economically and for our societies, and I think that's most important. But if that gets to us rather end of September, which is the current planning time, our presidency is rather short, so it is, as you said, quite revolutionary, Andre. It's the shortest timeline ever. It always took us longer, but we are determined to getting these decisions, so that hopefully by or around the time when we celebrate the 5th birthday of the Paris Agreement, the EU would be ready to state that it is able to do more. But it's to be seen. Just to mention 4 other priorities, 3 to 4 other priorities on the environment agenda, which are interlinked. For us, it is most important that we make progress in the different sectors as well. So I just take biodiversity strategy and farm to fork strategy. We always tend to think on what needs to be done in energy policies, on renovation wave, in speeding up of building offshore wind parks and deploying renewable energies. Yes, we are on that, but biodiversity is key for us as well. It's a second huge global threat. And as China will be the host of COP15, now postponed, of the Biodiversity Convention, it is an important topic to interlink the resilience issues of our biological systems with the climate agenda, because the Chinese have an interest. Therefore, we want to move forward on the internal and the external agenda. We were supposed to chair our negotiating team that is towards Kunming, China. Now it is with the Portuguese, and we just spoke yesterday with the Portuguese minister, and we are determined to support the Portuguese and to prepare for that important endeavor. But I think it is important for us, the EU, because many of our policies are not sustainable just with regard to biological diversity, and the pandemic clearly shows us how biodiversity loss just has a huge negative impact on the resilience of our societies. Another thing I want to say is circular economy. The Commission put forward this spring a circular economy action plan, which is not a waste policy action plan. There is important components of waste, but it's about how do we produce, how do we design products, and if we want to become climate neutral by 2050, getting better on product design and really designing a circular economy for the benefit of the European competitiveness is key. And last, I think in this point, just my introduction, is what are the key drivers of what we see in future? I would argue overcoming the climate crisis, and secondly, managing the mega trend of digitalization in a way that digitalization is a driver for helping us achieving our targets and not for having negative rebound effects. And we will be taking it up already in our ministerial video conference in July, but we're carrying it through, in particular with issues regarding the ecological footprint of the digital world. That's one cluster. And the other one is things where we could use the digital world for better information, better data, for product passports, for example, where you can see the ecological footprint of a product and allow consumers to make choices, informed choices. So we are convinced that the pandemic should not be to the detriment of our ambitious agenda, just the opposite. Times of crisis are difficult, but times of crisis offer the opportunity to become stronger and just making real shifts in our societies, and we're determined to try our best in moving the EU forward to the first climate neutral continent, which is highly competitive and can help shaping a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karsten. We have a bunch of people who have raised their hands, but before we do that, just a couple of issues that I wanted to raise with you. You were to be, I mean, you are the Director General for European and International Climate Policy. You are going to be the voice.
Also for national climate politics, my dear. Since more than 4 years, all just renewable energies and whatever is on my plate as well.
Well,
so
there you have it. Okay, I stand corrected, Karsten. But nevertheless, you are going to be the voice of the EU at the incoming COP that was supposed to happen in Glasgow. That's obviously not happening now. It's been punted to next year. There is no substance this year. So the question that I would have to you is, how much is the international part going to be present on your agenda, and how are you going to make this bridge, because we don't want to lose that important progress that we've made over the last few years?
you have recognized that in April, we have done the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, which is a ministerial meeting for shaping the international climate agenda as always. And we had the Chancellor on board already. Yes, some of the timelines and the time pressures which were caused by the Glasgow COP at the beginning of November this year have fallen down. But the obligations out of the Paris agreements have not been altered. So there is an obligation for putting forward an enhanced NDC this year. And that's why we are planning and having the agenda I outlined. Secondly, it is important to keep climate change and other global issues on the political agenda, and not just of environment ministers, but of heads of states. That's a challenge which having, for example, Saudi Arabia hosting the G20 and President Trump hosting the G7 and having no Glasgow COP this year. So that's my concept and the concept of my British friends of creating stepping stones. So important ones are probably the virtual settings we will be having at the anniversary of the United Nations in September. So climate change and biodiversity will be important. Then there's a Paris Peace Summit in November, where in particular the issue of climate finance, what can we do in international development finance in financing resilient and climate-friendly infrastructure is on. And then there's a lot of talk on for the 11th of December to celebrate the birthday. So there will be some events, but there will be no formal events in a bigger way under our presidency. It has been postponed to our Slovenian friends in the second half next year, but so it will be happening. So that's where we are. We're trying to creating the events, but it's important to reach out to getting transport ministers, economic ministers, and others on board, and really to moving forward.
Listen, Karsten, one thing you mentioned, you referred to the fact that the most ministers are moving forward, and that we all hope that by the October Council, both the Council and the Parliament are going to start being aligned. We can move over to the climate law. We can have the 2030 targets. Nevertheless, you did mention also the fact that there was some, reticence. There was some not skepticism. There was some more thoughtful. I don't know. People showed some concerns. I had a session on another moderated on another Zoom with the president of PGE, with the Polish power company. And he's quoted as saying that we've learned from our rich neighbors, I don't know who the rich neighbors are, but from our rich neighbors, that is usually sometimes more expensive than we had anticipated to do these changes. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what it will take to move these people forward in terms of getting alignment? We have now 3-4 months to reach that total alignment.
It's a big and important question whether things got more expensive or not. If you look at the economic data, things have gotten much cheaper because we saw renewables, and probably the issue my Polish friends did say is that transformation which leave no one behind, and building political alliances and political compromises in a complex political society in times where investment is needed sometimes sums up to quite large bills. It's political choices that you do that this way, and doing less through regulatory approaches. So that's in. But there is no new coal-fired power built in Europe, and under our liberalized market conditions, there is no case. And you see that we just negotiated, and I was big part in it, just a coal phase out which from some sides is criticized as being too expensive. I think we pacified an issue. And you could argue that power companies have difficulties to earn their money in this situation, and there would be a rough economic phase down already, but that's not what we want as an aspect. So I think the money we might have is on the table. The Commission made a proposal. We see that the so-called Frugal Four are fighting for climate change and just using the money most effectively. We see that we very often see bazookas also in the European Investment Bank. And I think the issue is not how much, but how to combine the long-term objectives with short-term economic recovery. It's not always easy, and social cohesion to build that. And you will not get, not from the president, and even if I were not entering the presidency in number. Sometimes there are very high numbers mentioned. I think everybody can have dreams, but I think we need to be realistic of what is possible.
Absolutely. Karsten, last thing that I will ask is, there's always two different sides to this discussion. One is the level of ambition, which I think that most of the world will applaud the EU, and I think it's quite refreshing to see that many of the companies and associations in Brussels, at least on the face of it, are very supportive. We'll see how supportive they're to the end, but they seem to be supportive at this point. There's the other side, that of carbon leakage and competitiveness. Now that is right now at an earliest stage of the debate, in the sense that it's supposed to come to some fruition to the proposal next year. Is this something that is also is going to come one way or another in part of the discussions before you pass the law, or it really is going to be going into next year?
It is certainly a big issue. Yes, if we want to be really ambitious, aspects of cohesion within the EU are important, but issues of avoiding carbon leakage and creating a relatively level playing field become important. So the question is, what is the order in your mind? Yes, an EU which is ambitious needs to work for level playing fields, but I would say, and for example, we hope that we still have the EU-China Heads of State Summit. It's offering cooperation to creating those level playing fields. Because we are highly interconnected, are a huge trading partner as the EU, but in the last resort, of course, issues like carbon border adjustments are in play as well. But I think for us it's important, we are interconnected and we need to take the whole world with us. So it is our conviction that we need to make first cooperation office, and I'm sure that with those we can move the agenda much better forward than if we want to build a fence around Europe.
Very well, Karsten. I will now try to move on to panelists. We have Leon de Graaf, that I will give him the floor now. He is from Business Europe. Then we have other people, Anna, Hubert, and a number of others that will ask questions. But I think that unless something terribly wrong is going on, we should have Leon de Graaf show up on the screen, which he's for the moment not showing up on the screen, but now he's showing up on the screen. There you have it. Leon.
Perfect. Thank you, Andre, and Mr. Sach. Thank you very much for your initial opening statements. Leon de Graaf from Business Europe. I deal with environment and climate policy. I just had a quick question on the 2030 impact assessment of the European Commission that is upcoming. So at the last Environment Ministers meeting on the 23rd of June, some of the countries, they highlighted the importance to include in this impact assessment other impacts than just the EU-wide impact. So in particular member state impacts, maybe sector impacts. The European business community is also supporting those views. And what we were just wondering, do you agree that having such impacts already included at an early stage, so in this September impact assessment, that would maybe increase the chances of making the European Green Deal better able to basically help Europe recover from the crisis? So that's basically the question, because we have the feeling that the European Commission will probably only look at the EU-wide impacts. Thank you.
Karsten, we'll take one at a time, because I think I'm looking at the question that I see here on my screen. They're quite diverse, so I don't want to confuse too much.
I was in that meeting, Leon, as well, and I heard it, and it's not the first time, because we did a virtual tour de capitale with my minister. We spoke to each and every country, so something which was common some 15 years ago, we reinvented through Zoom or WebEx meetings. I think that we will get something which is something of a mix. I assume as well that many of the issues will be modeling impacts of the EU overall and regional issues, but I think the message of some countries has been heard. But some of the concrete country impacts can be only modeled in high quality if we know more on the instruments and the design of instruments. And that is not up for decision this year. It is the first step of a two-step decision-making. And therefore, yes, countries need to have some comfort that they can assess what it means for their country, but whether they should be aiming at having all detail yet spelled out, I have some questions. I heard that just in my 30 years of European experience more than one time, and but I heard the requests. But I hear a lot of business voices as well who try to move us forward, because time is of the essence, as you said. The money and the direction is just set out now, and we only can spend the money once.
Yeah.
Karsten, I have also a question. I encourage people to speak their own mind, but then sometimes people, either they are not on, they're on their phone and make it more difficult. But Ingo Raming from Commerzbank is asking that Germany is introducing a national ETS. How do you see the discussion on adding additional sectors into the EU ETS transport? And what would be the timeline, phase 5, or do you see the chance of introducing this during phase 4?
I think we are positive in having a carbon price at the European level on sectors not yet covered under the ETS. I'm personally very skeptical that we could include it into the ETS already in phase 4, because the relative prices in different sectors are quite different, and I would rather see a possible connection beyond 2030, and I would rather bet that it could be possible to have a pricing scheme, be it a second ETS, be it another carbon pricing system built up in parallel, with a view to considering linking them up later on.
I will now go to Anna Hubert, and she's been promoted. She'd like to, as a panelist, I'd like her to introduce herself very briefly and then try and keep to a question. It looks like the internet is not as cooperative as always, so it does take a few moments until people show up. Anna, are you there?
Yes, I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you, we can't see you, but we cannot hear you. But please introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm Anna Hubert. I'm a journalist from the French newspaper Context, working in Brussels. I have two questions regarding the incoming presidency and the priorities. First one is, will you start working on the mechanism, the adjustment mechanism at the border for carbon adjustment mechanism? Is that something that Germany can envisage and can help the Commission working with? Second question relates to the recovery program, the different legislative texts from the recovery funds and programs, and will the presidency work in order to add green conditionalities to the legislative text and proposal that were proposed by the Commission? Thanks a lot.
Karsten? I think this is related to the CBAM that we touched upon very briefly earlier.
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, the issue of possible adjustment mechanisms is not an issue of this year's agenda. We have had the Franco-German discussions, which I'm partly chairing on the issue, and we are willing to looking together with France into what that could mean. But if you look at the timeline of the Commission and others, it's part of the follow-up agenda of implementation of a possible package. Therefore, something for the years from 2021 onwards. On the recovery funds, I think we need work at two levels. I mentioned one already, and that is that we need a clear commitment from the European Council that countries and EU institutions would say that the do not harm principle is respected, and that we get just a commitment of all countries to working towards climate neutrality, which is a target. The second level then is translating that into the different sector legislation. The French minister put forward the word conditionalities very clearly. We heard quite some reactions to that proposal, and please allow me that as a future presidency, I don't take sides on that one, but having said that, yes, the green elements need to be captured in these regulations. I think that's important, but how it will be done exactly, we have to see how we move the agenda forward to the extent possible.
Karsten, you mentioned that this is something for next year's agenda more than this year, the CBAM. And I mean, we always come up with in this business of climate change with new acronyms. We can't resist this. we have been holding a number of, you'll be pleased that probably some of the people that you know, we've been holding a number of town hall meetings, virtual town hall meetings. We had one yesterday with India, some fairly senior people from the Indian side, and you'll be pleased to hear that it is, you know, the question I tried to put is this hell no or hell but? You know, are you willing to find a way and discuss? They seem to be not into a hell no position. They were more into let's find a way to discuss this. And also in this context, there are other ways that, other approaches that have been put forward, some of them by German think tanks, such as contracts for difference, consumption charges. Is this also something that is in some way percolating within the thinking?
Yes, contract for difference is an element which shows strongly also in our own recovery plans. I'm advocating that for decarbonizing the steel industry, for example, but also we think that quota for green steel are a good additional instrument in that direction. It has impact, as you said, that border adjustment or carbon adjustment mechanisms are mentioned in the Green Deal. And therefore, it is part of our external agendas. That is pretty clear. But if I go to business meetings, very often I see into frightened faces because getting certain privileges in the EU ETS internally, which business is in, and they want to have that on top. And that is, I cannot see that the competition commissioner or vice president would allow for that. And so we have always these two kinds of discussions, a political discussion and a public discussion. And once you go down to the weeds on concrete instruments, the whole discussion becomes much more complex. And that's why I just would like to say again, yes, we will have a discussion. If I go to European Parliament, I will be asked that question. I get it in nearly each and every public discussion, but it will be later when we really get to the real discussion, because then you have to make strategic choices of cooperation, of carbon adjustment mechanisms, and then altering systems which we have already within the EU. And so in the studies who are just trying to calibrate in that field offer some interesting dimensions. Let's put it like this, but it's an important issue because that's, yes, I think I made myself clear.
Yeah, I think I give the floor to Mr. Lawson. Are you there? Okay, he doesn't seem to be on the line. So I'll go to Kari.
Lawson, yeah.
Yeah, are you there?
Hi.
Okay, go ahead, please. Introduce yourself for Karsten, and then we can move on.
Yeah, hi guys. Thank you very much indeed for organising this and participating. I'm Lawson Steele and I work at Berenberg Bank, and I have been covering utilities for a very long time and the carbon market since 2004. So, sorry, I put the video on. I guess my question is, in order to meet any climate goals, obviously the correct carbon price is key. If it's too low, then there'll be no carbon abatement, and if it's too high, you injure industry in some cases permanently. So, really, what are your thoughts on where the carbon price should be or could go to? And discuss that a little bit for me, please.
Karsten,
I'll save my second question to after that.
Well, I think that let's go to other people, but Karsten, you have to come with a disclaimer that you don't want to influence the markets if you want to touch this one. Go ahead, please.
You will not get a concrete figures from me because in the market, I saw that today it's above 26 euros again. So it's just on the rise. And I think that shows you some market expectations that it will be going up. We see that some studies a few years ago asked for 60 or 80 that puts coal out of the market. We see that prices in the range we're having now has a huge impact on coal, for example. So I will not give you a price signal. In the part which we are designing outside the EU ETS, you see that we started with fixed price system and then gradually move into an emissions trading scheme in Germany, and we start relatively low with 20, but we see that in 5 years' time we go to 65 and then open market. So it gives you some indications of what we consider necessary and possible, but I won't give you a fixed price. That's for Andre to decide through his market.
No,
there will be many.
Expect a fixed price. But the second question tied into carbon is, with the 750 billion funds which are coming out of effectively the EU, there's been talk about sharing some of the carbon revenues between the EU and the 27 or 26 member states. And in the first
Why
instance, we
26
have,
member states?
sorry, 28 to 27 is what I mean.
Without yours in the UK, we are still 27. I don't know whether you have bought
Yeah.
out Ireland, but just to do a little bit of math, if you ask me figures.
Well, we're keeping that for the moment. But the original, the first opposition has been slightly ironic, I guess, from the Eastern European countries. But do you think this is likely to happen, and what kind of form or shape could it take?
Don't know yet. I think how you create the revenues is not that largely and vastly discussed now, but it will come back to us. And I think carbon pricing is one of the sources of generating incomes for the longer time. So I don't know what that sharing exactly will be looking at. I think we will be having that discussion, but I don't expect that to happen now.
Yeah, thanks, Lawson. If I may, Kari Kankama from Finland. Kari, do you want to introduce yourself to Karsten, please? Kari? Looks like there is an unusual delay on the line, Karsten, for people getting on when we promote people, so that it's a bit of a problem. So what we'll do is I will then promote somebody else. I'll promote Gumbau from Carbon Pulse. You do get a few journalists that are asking questions. I think it's an opportunity for them. So Anna, are you there?
Hello, I think I'm there, yes.
Okay, Anna? Okay, go ahead, Anna, please.
Hi, this is Anna Gumbau with Carbon Pulse. I have a question also concerning the EU ETS and carbon pricing. So we've been seeing different statements from government officials, even also in some draft programs from the presidency, that one of the objectives is to strengthen the EU ETS. So I wonder what that means in practice. So we've been discussing earlier the issue of expanding the scope of the EU ETS, but also the carbon price floor. So I just wondered, what's the margin of maneuver from the presidency to be steering these discussions forward? And also, if I may, I'm curious to know why Germany seems to be supporting now the proposal for a carbon price floor. What's changed now in this regard? Thank you.
I think on the question on how to strengthen the ETS, I think the central discussion we will be having is, after we got the impact assessment and the concrete proposal, is strengthening the reduction factor. Whether we get something which we are sympathetic, as you're mentioning, of introducing a minimum price, that's a second element. A third element I was answering already earlier on, that I don't believe that we will have an enlargement of sectors into the transport and the building sectors in the short term, in just maritime or aviation strengthening elements. I think are some which will be coming, but I won't be too concrete. I wait for the impact assessment and the proposals, but I said my role is to getting people together and not to expressing too clear-cut positions on the issues now.
Karsten, I again, you're, as I was expected, I know you for many years, what you're describing is something very focused. This is what you're, the thing that needs to be passed this fall, and this is what you're going to be focusing on. If you're looking at the debate in the parliament, you see a number of things that popped up in there, a lot more ambitious target, 65%. That is significant. I mean, that will take you to an LRF of 5.5%, almost double what we have now, more than double. So that is serious. We also, things such as a budget, which is also, takes us back to another world, to the world of Kyoto. Are these things that, without committing the German presidency, which you mentioned many times, it's here to to bring people together, not to take position. Any reaction that you can comment from what you've heard with your colleagues so far? These seem to be very ambitious type of things.
On the ambition level first, I told you what my chancellor showed sympathy for, and that's for the Commission proposals put forward. And I think it was Leon earlier on and you yourself who listened into the council this week. I think an issue like thinking of 65%, I think that is not in the basket of possible options forward. And if I speak to the Parliament, but you have probably as many contacts as I with the Parliament, there are some substantial points in, and there are some tactical points in, and we need to separate them. And what is done in the Environment Committee probably alters also what I expect to be happening in plenary. So it's in there. Yes, and you're right, there is a whole plethora of motions in the Parliament of what could be done structurally and just on the ambition level. But I will not comment on that one because some will be part of the compromise finding in the end. And you know that as much as I do. And you also know that if you have no clear picture yet on how that will be developing, and that was asked in further questions, it's in there. I can assure you, but you hear that already, that some things are shaping up, and even in the Parliament, and Pascal Canfin is fighting like hell for getting an early agreement. You saw a certain postponement, and you see the interlinkages which you rightly make with the budget discussions we are having, and taxonomy and other issues were mentioned earlier on. It is important to have the whole picture of the transformation, and some are rather soft elements, but important elements because they give clear signals to market investment decisions. And then there are some hard elements, and including probably the biggest token in the hard element is to get a legally binding decision on the level of ambition we want to set ourselves for 2030. And that will be just something which is, if we will be achieving that, will be that big issue for the EU. And I think basically the Commission put forward that as the litmus test for whether the EU is capable for being climate neutral with a thriving economy. And that's basically the big challenge. And if you see what's happening in the US and some others of our competitors, you hear different tones, and therefore debate, to focus the debate on whether 65 is the right target for me is an interesting one for articles outside there, but I think it's not the heart of the matter.
Listen, let me switch very quickly to the EU methane strategy. The Commission will publish this autumn. Their companies have called for the strategy to address methane emissions associated with the import of natural gas. Is this something that, this is something that we've heard in some of our discussions, and it has some relevance. Germany has been supportive of gas in general, and that is the perception out there. Where I've seen articles from some NGO actually, kind of being somewhat critical of that. How do you react to that?
I'm just a big believer in getting the facts right, and there is always assertions that the impact of exploring and transporting natural gas and the related methane emissions are underestimated. And therefore, that we should cover that through a mechanism that just gives us clarity. I'm positive about it. But as you are saying, it's a proposal which is coming forward most likely late in our presidency agenda and will not up for discussion in our presidency.
Okay. I have given the floor to Ewa Krukowska from Bloomberg. She covers Brussels, and I think she's well known to you and to many of us, and for her work for many years. Ewa?
Yes, hello, Andrei, hello, Mr. Zach. I just wanted to ask you, in fact, two questions. The first one is about Poland, because originally, before the crisis, the plan was to have...
Eva, I cannot understand you.
Eva, I think
Andrei needs to translate it because it's
well,
echoing.
I'm having difficulty also understanding as well, so I have a problem as well understanding. Eva, maybe unless you can do this, maybe you can write it up and I can read it, but I understand Karsten having problems because I'm having also a very, very, very high pitch. Eva?
Hello?
Eva?
Yes, can you hear me now?
A little bit better if you speak slowly, maybe.
Okay. I have two questions. The first one is about Poland. Because before the crisis, the plan was that the European Council will discuss the Polish situation regarding the climate neutrality objective in June. For obvious reasons, that did not happen. So my question is if the German presidency is going to discuss it at any point at all. And my second question is about the 2030 targets. Is there any possibility of having an agreement in the Council on the 2030 targets without going into the nitty-gritty of the effort sharing regulation?
I got the second question. I didn't get the first one. I think on the second question, it is up for heads of state and government to decide, because I put forward our timeline, and I think it is not too much to say. We will be only publishing our presidency program next Tuesday on the 30th but it's decided by the German Cabinet of Ministers that we strive to finalize the discussions on an enhanced NDC and ambition level under our presidency. And as I said earlier on, I expect data on a variety of fields, but I see that some are asking for even more data. But that, as I said, happened in our last decision cycle as well. So I think that's all I can say. But Andrei, could you translate what was the first question? There was something postponed from the European Council, and so, but I have no idea what the question was.
I can't make it up, but let's
Is it better now? Can you hear me better?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you better.
Oh, that's good, because I'm on speakerphones now. It was basically a question about Poland and the climate neutrality objective, because the plan for the European Council was to come back to the discussions about what to do about the Polish situation in June. But because in June, the only issue on the agenda was the recovery package, that didn't happen, of course. So my question is there any sort of obstacle to an agreement on the climate law? And if the presidency is going to discuss it?
We will be coming back to all issues related to the enhancement of the EU target in the European Councils under our presidency, and I'm pretty sure that the issue raised by Poland can and will be covered there, but I think it will be seen in a broader field. But let's us now see what the Commission is putting forward, because that will be key.
Karsten, we have just a few minutes, and I want to turn to what is, I think it's a very important element, and that is the upcoming, hopefully, EU-China summit. I do believe, considering also that we're running into EU presidential election, that is something that will provide a very strong signal. What is your expectation? What kind of thing would you expect? Chinese action, agreement with China. What kind of outcome would you see possible from that discussion?
You know that the formal EU-China summit just happened, and through video conference, and the Chinese side, it was not only Li Keqiang but also Xi Jinping present. The big summit with all European heads of state and government and President Xi on the Chinese side had to be postponed due to the COVID pandemic, but it is our aspiration, if at all possible, to hold it later in our presidency. So it is hopefully in November or December. It has been confirmed by the leaders in the most recent that climate change is one of the top priorities, next to investment, working together on fighting the pandemic, and some policy issues which are important there. We want to build a climate cooperation agenda with China on the issues, but I cannot just look into a crystal ball of what will be the concrete outcome of that. And even if I knew, I would not disclose it here.
Thank you. I wouldn't expect any other answer for Karsten. Now, Karsten, also moving the international arena, there is the priorities with the EU-Africa summit, and what kind of cooperation with Africa can we expect? I mean, Africa will play an important role in moving forward with this. That's probably the last question we can afford for now.
It's planned to have the EU-Africa summit in October. We see that recovery is the big topic, and we think that a focus should be on offering an alternative model of energy to Africa, because all economic recovery needs energy, and there are huge renewable energy potentials. But an issue which is as important is combining different aspects of increasing resilience. So adaptation is an issue which is mentioned with relation to better agriculture, water management, increasing the resilience of the health systems in their countries. So it will be issues which are at the verge of economic recovery, strengthening resilience, which have a strong climate component, but will be linked with priorities which became even more vigilant, more important through just the corona pandemic now. I think that's it is on the agenda, and it is, I think, most important that we have that aspect of solidarity in helping the African continent coping with the huge challenges we just see coming up through inter alia through the corona pandemic, and therefore this summit is probably next to the China summit the big external action element of the German presidency.
It is 16:00.
Yeah, I have to leave, and it just unfortunately.
Exactly. That's why I say I kept my word. It's 16:00. we will stop here. I would like on behalf of everybody to thank you, Karsten, for taking the time. It's appreciated. I hope you found it interesting, that there were maybe a few things that would give you the temperature of an unscientific temperature of what's going on. And we wish you good luck with the German presidency. Thank you very much for being here.
Very much looking forward to
you very
seeing
much.
you again. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye, Karsten.